Welcome to the Lessons for Living television program. My name is Bill Santos. Thank you so much for watching. Well, as promised on our previous program, Derek Sloan is back with us again this week. Derek, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Bill.
I appreciate you making the time available to spend with us and our viewers. And we ended the last program sort of at the point where you were involved in the Trinity Western University case, and that and some other things became a catalyst that you said, I'm going to need to step out and venture into the world of politics. And so can we begin there maybe and start and say, so how did that, go about, and, what was that experience like for you?
Well, I obviously went to law school thinking I would be a lawyer, as most people do. And it began to dawn on me over the period of a few years that, I would be potentially better served to be in politics. The students and the teachers and so on that that were at my school, I realized that they didn't really have the same understanding of freedom of speech and freedom of conscience that I did. So one of the things about the Trinity Western case that concerned me before it was even decided on was that the majority of students and teachers at the school thought that Trinity Western should not have a law school. Keep in mind, this is a private Christian school. It's not taking, public money or anything like that. They just have a simple community covenant, a Christian document that's, just some generic standards of behavior that anybody would assume a Christian university would expect.
And it's not the only law school.
Right.
So there's other options.
Right.
Go someplace else.
There's many other law schools. Yeah. So what happened with this case and my experience at school led me to be concerned. And a lot of my classmates who believed this were also very into politics. And it occurred to me that, those of us who just want to sort of go along and mind your own business, there's other people who want to take us out and want to punish us for our beliefs. And I realized that these kinds of people were going to be on the bench as judges in a couple of decades. And if lawyers are a barometer for, the guardians of freedom or something like that, I saw a very poor reading in law school. So I began to become a lot more interested in politics, and I began to, slowly sort of think about ways I might be able to get involved. I was not, a politician. I didn't grow up in a family of politicians. Right. So I didn't even really know how to get involved. But the place that I moved to after I graduated happened to be having a nomination race for a major political party there. And I thought, you know what, why don't I throw my hat into the ring, see what happens.
Right.
Before I did that, though, I spent a lot of time in prayer, and I made a bit of a deal with God. I was articling at the time, which means it's a period of time after law school where you're working for a firm, basically learning the skills of the trade and the ropes and so on. And so I said, listen, Lord, if they hire me back, I'm not going to do politics, because why would I? I mean, I just went to school for 3 years.
Yes.
I'm not going to throw that away on some whim.
Yes.
Not that you would have to throw it away, but I knew that it would be I wouldn't have time to sort of get into it if I was hired again. And so very shortly after that, I was notified that they liked me and they thought I was doing a good job, but they didn't think that there was a place economically for me after articling. And so I was actually pretty happy about that, because I got a pretty clear guidance. And so I kind of jumped into this nomination race. And I was in an area where I just moved to that area, so I didn't know a lot of people. There was a lot of, there's 3 other people in the nomination race. They all had, more contacts, more financial resources than I did. And I ended up winning that very decisively about 9 months later when we had the vote. And that was probably, even though that was just a nomination race. So for people who don't understand how politics works, before you see somebody's name on the sign, there's usually some kind of internal process in the party to pick who represents
represent the party, right?
Exactly. So this was a mini election where about 550 people cast a vote, and but for me that win was one of the most emotional wins of like any. I've done a lot of things. I've been on national television, done some things that you might consider momentous, but that particular day in that high school gym in Tweed, Ontario was probably the most emotionally significant day for me, because I didn't know how it was going to turn out. Like everybody was like, you have no chance of winning, you haven't sold enough memberships, you don't have enough supporters. But what I was able to do, and one thing, when I got into that room, I knew I had to go last, because my speech was basically about my vision for the country, and I didn't want anybody to sort of see that see what I was doing and then copy it. And so I prayed that I'd be drawn out of the hat to go last, and I was. And so everybody else got up and they spoke about themselves, basically, in a good way, like this is what I've done, this is but nobody really said what they were going to do. Like, what's your vision for the country? What do you want to do? And so I got up there. I didn't have a past to brag about. I hadn't been a city councillor for 14 years. I hadn't done much really. And so I basically just gave my vision for the country, gave a very passionate speech about how concerned I was about the direction of things. And a lot of people in that room who had come to support other candidates ended up voting for me. And so I was sort of the underdog, surprise winner. I won very handily. So how these things work, you have to get 50% of the vote, and it's a ranked ballot. So if nobody gets 50% on the first vote, then they look to the second choice or the third choice. And I almost got 50% on the first ballot. Wow. And then I was well over 50% on the second ballot. So it was very decisive. So that was, it was a time where I was like, you know what, I'm doing the right thing. Because I wasn't really sure before that. Had I just wasted, 9 months, on a frivolous sort of thing. And so from there, I knew that I was in the right calling. And, I never had gotten into politics because I like politics. I don't even really like politics per se. I'm just very concerned about the direction of Canada. And I know that we need to stand up and do something about it. And it doesn't mean that, exactly what I've done is your calling. But I just know that we as Canadians need to stand up and do something. And so I'd always decided that anytime a door would open that would allow me to sort of expand my influence or make a bigger impact on things, I would go through that. And so shortly after I was elected, the opportunity to run for leadership of that party happened. And so even though that doesn't really make sense to the average person, you wouldn't want to run for leader of a party when you haven't been a politician for long, I decided to do that. And so I did skip the part where I actually got elected to be a member of parliament, but shortly after that, I decided to run for leadership. And again, that was a very, very interesting experience that really, I think, really I was able to get my message to hundreds of thousands of Canadians across the country and really strike a chord for, the direction that we need to be moving in Canada. So,
sort of my assessment as a layperson looking on the outside is that there seemed to have at some point been a shift. I know the Adventist Church has been extremely vocal and participated in the argument and the fight for religious freedom. But for everyone, that we are in a marketplace here, every voice should be heard. That's the way this country is supposed to work. I'm now getting a sense as a layperson that there's been a shift in that it's like, no, we don't want everyone's voice heard. We want voices heard that are in alignment with what we say is the approved narrative. Is that something I'm reading? Am I mistaken in my reading of that? Because that's the sense that I get as a layperson. That it's not like, listen, we want to see everyone have the right to express their ideas and their beliefs and their opinions and, equally. But I'm getting the sense that it's not like there's certain ideas or certain opinions that there's movement to suppress, to not let you speak.
Yeah,
Is that a misread?
I think you're definitely right, and I think that the governments and the leaders that we have use the language of what you've just said in terms of, oh, we believe in free speech, and you can have whatever beliefs you want, you can say whatever you want. They don't actually believe that anymore, and we're moving to a point right now where diverging from the popular opinion or even the government's objectives when it comes to certain policy initiatives can have real consequences. So we're seeing the time where, if you don't believe the right thing about, certain progressive issues or gender or sexuality or any of these things, you can be severely punished from an accreditation point of view if you're a professional, from a business point of view, or even worse, depending on the situation. So we're definitely in a time where there's far more compliance expected of people to toe certain narratives than ever before. And a lot of people haven't realized that we're there yet because the government still uses sort of the classically liberal language that you just used, where, you can believe whatever you want, we're a free society. So it's a frightening time because we're seeing, the doors of freedom shut right in front of us.
And where do you see that happening more? Like, what have you seen? You've been there. What have you seen that concerns you?
Sure. Well, we're seeing many laws come forward that have sort of an ideological compliance mechanism built in. A great example of this is the Canadian Summer Jobs program.
Yes.
And now this is years old now.
Yes.
But this is a really good example of sort of where we're going. The Canada Summer Jobs program is a program where the government for years has helped small businesses hire students who are on break for the summer just to sort of give them some experience and, get a student a job that wouldn't maybe have gotten one otherwise. Shortly after the Trudeau Liberals were elected, they put a little ideological sort of checkbox you had to check off. And it basically said something along the lines of, you agree with women's reproductive rights, including abortion and so on. And a lot of organizations, whether they were religious or not, just didn't feel right checking that off. They didn't feel it was the government's business. They didn't feel, that it was in any way
So that was a condition to receive the funding?
It was a condition to receive government funding that was paid for by taxpayers, that was supposed to be available generally to Canadian businesses. So you may not have even had a Christian business. You could have been any kind of business, but maybe you were a Christian and you just didn't feel like checking that off. Your business had nothing to do with abortion or
you felt
rights.
It's not the government's business.
And some people just felt it wasn't the government's business.
What I believe on that, yeah.
Exactly. So this was their thing. They eventually kind of changed that after a lot of blowback in society. But this is an example of where we're going. We're seeing a lot of talk in scholarly circles about making charitable status contingent on sort of having the right beliefs. So if you're a church that believes in traditional marriage or believes in certain traditional values, there's a lot of people in the scholarly world who say you should not have any tax advantage or charitable advantage for that. So this is the direction that we're going. We're also seeing the misapplication of a lot of different human rights laws and other laws like that are silencing people who speak up and have an opinion. During the last couple of years, when we had COVID-19, we also saw the government sort of censorship mentality on steroids, where people who disagreed with the way that the government was handling their response to COVID-19, even doctors and nurses were getting hammered by their accreditation boards and so on. And some of that is still ongoing. There's people who are still in court dealing with some of those issues. There's other examples as well, but those are some good ones.
Yeah, that's. I've sort of felt that as a layperson, that there's been this shift. One of the things I was reading about, and I think you're quite outspoken on, is the assisted suicide. There's apparently some shifting happening also in what that is all about. Can you explain to our viewers a little bit about what's going on?
Right. So assisted suicide was brought in actually by a court decision, not by the Parliament initially. as have many changes, which is a topic for another time. But the government at the time, the Trudeau Liberals, brought in a bill that was again later on struck down by the courts as being not sort of permissive enough. But instead of appealing that decision, they decided just to bring in more legislation, basically opening up the floodgates for more people to get assisted suicide. And now we're at the point where they're going to expand it to people with mental health issues. So so that's actually frightening, because how can you on one hand provide realistic sort of suicide prevention and counseling when assisted suicide is available for people with mental health issues? So no physical ailments, no pain, just a mental health issue. And lots of people are at a point where they feel that they can't go on. But the point of counseling and psychiatry and other things, and these mental, like, psychiatry does not admit that there is such a thing as incurable mental illnesses.
Right.
Like, the whole profession is predicated on the fact that there are ways to cure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That doesn't mean that there's people who are very resistant to treatment and may never find a treatment in their lifetime, perhaps. But the door is open, and these organizations aren't willing to concede otherwise. But what we're seeing is now an expansion soon into assisted suicide for people who have mental health issues only. And we're also seeing a lot of sort of anecdotal examples of people effectively being pushed into taking this. And none of these things have been proven in court, but there's people who have said, listen, they kind of told me I had to either leave the hospital or choose assisted suicide. Or there's some veterans that say that they're being kind of clandestinely shuttled towards assisted suicide. And it's awful to think about. I mean, it obviously saves the government a lot of money from a pension perspective if people make this choice. But I have a feeling there's a lot of abuse in this system.
Oh, of course.
And I don't think it's right to be expanding this in this way. It's certainly not right. And this is exactly the kind of thing that people like me were saying initially. It's a slippery slope. Everybody said, oh, you're crazy. It's not a slippery slope. But in fact, it's very slippery. And we're almost off the edge of the slope, but it's been only a few years.
Why aren't more Christians speaking up on these issues?
A lot of Christians, like many people, are busy working. They're busy taking their kids to activities. They're busy, putting bread on the table. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think it's very important for all Canadians to wake up and hold our leaders to account, because our leaders are of the mentality that that they can kind of do whatever they want. And Canadians, historically have had relatively stable government, so they don't pay as much attention to what's going on. But it is so critical at every level, at the school board trustee level, at the city councillor level, at the provincial level, at the federal level, that Canadians, are aware of what's going on and, stand up and maybe write a letter to their local member of parliament or write an email to their local provincial member. And maybe run for something themselves if they feel called to do that. It's important to be awake and aware of what's going on.
It's interesting. Paul says, "I'm not ashamed of the gospel," right? And it almost seems like sometimes that we just want to go along to get along. We don't want the pushback.
Yeah.
We don't want to be called radicals or unhinged or whatever the case is, but I would agree that we have a responsibility to shape our country. It's our country. Those government officials are referred to as public servants, right? I mean, we're the ones that shape the country. And so I would encourage folks to be more vocal and express their opinions, whether their opinion is in alignment with mine or not. Make your opinions known, make your voice heard, right? But we can't just sit back and let things happen and not do anything.
Well, I would say, just to sort of crystallize it for your viewers, the way that if certain sort of people in the human rights tribunals and the people who are sort of in that realm of thinking, if they had their way, a lot of the things we believe as Christians we wouldn't be allowed to share those anymore.
That's where it's gotten frightening for me.
Exactly. And for example, one of those things would simply be Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. That implies that other people are not, that other, ways of seeking heaven are not the right way. And that's effectively our right as Christians to believe that. That doesn't mean everybody has to believe that. That doesn't mean that other people will.
That's right.
But, the sort of the mentality that's coming from, some of this human rights legislation and how it's working is sort of everything is 100% equal. And if you in any way suggest that, your way is the only way or the right way or whatever, that is wrong and you need to be penalized. And so we're moving in that direction. There's a lot of other examples I can give you, but the basic, this sort of super plurality where everything, like there is no such thing as truth, everything is equal. You may have your belief, but it doesn't mean it's true or doesn't mean that it has any validity. These kinds of things, Christianity makes some very exclusive claims. You can believe them or not believe them, but that is what these human rights tribunals are going after. They're going after the ability to have, specific beliefs on specific things and to basically be able to call a spade or to call, sin or wickedness by its name. And that's what they're trying to undermine. And that's why politics is dangerous. And that's what I noticed when I was in law school, that they're coming for us. And it's not everybody, but there's a committed group of political people who are trying to influence things to come after people who believe traditional Christian values.
Wow, that's a very sobering warning, isn't it? It's prophetic, though, isn't it? I mean, there's a prophetic element to that, isn't there?
The Bible tells us that we'll face persecution. But let's not hope and let's not wait for that to happen. Yeah. We need to get out there and, if at all possible, counteract it.
We only have a couple minutes left, and I could be talking with you. Between you and Barry, I get such a lesson on, sadly, as a pastor, as someone that I consider myself relatively, up to par, up to speed on what's happening in the country. Every time I hear you guys, I learn something.
Yeah.
And the comment that you made that there's a movement to suppress that, to not allow certain things, that is terrifying to me.
Yes.
That is frightening to me.
Yes, and it's well on its way. For those churches or groups that hold traditional views, there is a strong minority of people in this country who would want your status as an organization stripped and your ability to preach or say those things taken away.
Wow. It was very frightening to me when I saw something I had never thought I'd ever see in Canada, when I saw fences being put up around churches, preventing people from entering churches during the COVID. I'm not here to comment on COVID and what it was, but that image is, I don't think I'll ever forget that. I never thought I'd see that in Canada.
Well, I'll tell you what this is proof of. And again, not from the COVID perspective, but it's proof that Christianity does not have a privileged place as it may once have had in this country. So for people who think that, oh, well, Canada, it's a Christian nation, blah, 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 those protections are eroding. And churches do not have the significance that they once held in this country.
We're all out of time, Derek. It goes by fast, doesn't it?
It very, very much does.
We're going to have you back again because there's so many other topics I want to talk to you about that we haven't even touched on. But I want to thank you so much for what you've been doing and standing up for your Christian beliefs.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, we want to thank you for your love, your mercy, your kindness, and the opportunity you give us to just be your children and to have access through what Jesus did for us to eternal life. I want to thank you for Derek and his family and just continue to guide him and bless him as he works to allow for truth and message and your word to be presented in this country. Father, I pray once again for the leaders of our nation. Just guide them and allow them the humility to accept guidance from you. And bless each and every viewer, I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we've come to the end of another Lessons for Living television program. Before we go, I want to take this opportunity to thank Derek for being with us. And Derek, folks that may be interested in getting your book, Glorious and Free, where can they go to get it?
So if you go to Amazon.ca and search for Derek Sloan or Glorious and Free, you'll see both the hard copy and the ebook available for sale on Amazon.
Okay, so on Amazon.ca.
Yeah, I think you can get it on the .com too, but if you're in Canada, you might as well go to the .ca, and then you get free, free shipping and all that kind of thing.
Excellent. And what we will do is on our previous programs page on our website, we'll put a link there also that folks can directly then have access to the purchase of your book. And so thanks for being here. We're going to have you back again.
Good.
Because there's so many other topics we need to talk about.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Derek. And thank you again for watching. Let me remind you of our website, l4ltv.com. On the website, you have access to all of our previous programs. As I said, there'll be a link there to Derek's book. Also, you have also a Donate Today page. Every penny that is donated to the ministry goes back into the ministry. It doesn't come to myself or my family. I pastor a church. I get a salary for that. Every penny that you commit to this ministry goes to pay for the airtime, the studio time, the gifts we give out. It's all reinvested directly in the ministry. Hey, follow me on Instagram. Every morning at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time, I put out a short devotional video. It's a great way to get the day started. Check out our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter. And you can also go to SoundCloud. Just look up Lessons for Living Television on SoundCloud. You can download an audio version of the program. I think our programs play out really well on audio. And so you can just download it and carry that with you and listen to it on your way to work, in your car, or on public transit, and get the message that way. We are all out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you back with us again next time. We'll see you then. God bless you.